first of all, thanks to Value for hosting the meetup. I really wish I could be there, but I'm glad I get to present a little bit to you guys on video. And Daniel, thanks for your help organizing all of this and all of your contributions as a Polkadot ambassador so far. So let's get started. Today I'm going to talk briefly about Web 3.0 and kind of why all this is happening right now with this decentralization movement. And I'll talk about Polkadot and Kusama Network, and that'll lead into Daniel talking more around Substrate, which is the kind of software development kit or toolkit that's used to build blockchains on Polkadot or Kusama. So first off, just a quick intro. Again, I'm Dan Reecer. I work for the Web3 Foundation, primarily focused on the community growth and kind of growth marketing around Polkadot Network and Kusama Network. And I'm also leading up a lot of the work around growing in this Latin America and South American community. Prior to working in the blockchain industry, I was in the pharmaceutical industry. I did a lot of work around global brand marketing, US brand marketing, product pricing, digital marketing for 4 years at Eli Lilly in Indiana. And then I transitioned into the blockchain and crypto industry, spent a year and a half as heading up marketing for another interoperability company called OneChain. That's what brought me to Austin. And then I've been at Web3 for about 6 months. One thing I wanted to kind of explain briefly, I mentioned I work for Web3. You'll also hear Parity a lot, and these are the two organizations that you can see on the slide that are primarily driving forward the growth and development of Polkadot and Kusama. So the Web3 Foundation is based in Switzerland, and we have around 45 employees, and we're focused a lot around the cryptographic research side. We also have teams like our team, collaborations, communications, and we give out Web3 grants for teams building on the technology. Parity, on the other hand, is a very developer-heavy organization. I think they have around maybe 120 employees, and most of them are developers, so they're helping to build Polkadot and Kusama. They've built the Substrate framework, and in the past they've done work with Ethereum, with Bitcoin, and other projects, and they're a really powerful and talented organization. So let's get started with Web3. So going back to probably the late 80s, early 90s is really when the web and what we are referring now to as Web 1.0 really started to sprout up. This is when more user-friendly interfaces like web browsers started to pop up, but normal people, non-developers like me, and even people that were in their in older ages, they were able to start being able to interact with the internet, but it was really more only being able to read what was on the internet. There wasn't as much ease in contributing content into the internet until Web 2.0 started around probably the early 2000s. So this is the web that we're experiencing today, where it's super easy for me to post on Facebook or upload a picture onto Instagram or record a video and upload that to YouTube, which is me contributing or writing information into the web. But Web 2.0, at first, yes, it changed the world for the better. I mean, Web 2.0 really connected the world and made the world a much smaller place. Myself and Daniel, being from the US and Colombia, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, even 90s, it would have been very unlikely for us to meet, first of all, but to be able to communicate in such an easy way through WhatsApp and through Zoom calls and so on. So it's really great how it connected people in terms of friendships and business and e-commerce. But at the other hand, it empowered a lot of really powerful tech companies into these massive monopolies who are beginning to manipulate us and take advantage of the data that they're gathering on us. So Web 2.0 has really made you and I the product. I saw a quote the other day from, I believe it was from Tim Cook, but it was basically saying that any free product that you see online is not actually free. When you see a free product, or when you utilize or interact with a free product online, you are the product. That's the end. That's the end of the story. So this tech boom that we started seeing in the 90s, early 2000s, is no longer a tech boom. It's more so an advertising and marketing boom that we're experiencing today. If you think about all the examples and start being more aware of the free things, that free in quotes, that you're being sold. One example, Spotify was offering me a free Google Home device, and when I went to register to actually redeem the device, I had to give Google all of my Spotify data. And what they were really trying to do was, they were, of course, subsidizing the free Google Home, but for me to get the Google Home, they clearly thought that my data from Spotify was more valuable than the actual Google Home device itself. So it's interesting when you start to be more aware around all the free things that we're given through the internet. And through this process, we've really lost our privacy, and there's a lot of people around the world trying to figure out what can we do to take back ownership of our privacy online, to take back ownership of our data, and change the way that we interact with the web. So there's a lot of things involved with Web 3.0, and I'll get into a few of those. One of the solutions is blockchain. Blockchain is definitely not the end-all be-all solution to all problems that some people may like to claim, but blockchain is a fundamental building block that Web 3.0 will be built on, and it'll be really interesting to watch all the development over the next 5 to 10 years. So this is what I had just kind of gone through. So Web 1.0 is very basic. Web 2.0, we started being able to interact and write data into the web. And now Web 3.0 is really an internet based on decentralization, based on building trust into the actual code instead of having to trust these massive organizations. And then an internet based on privacy and security. So we'll get into that and how Polkadot and Kusama relate to this. So I'm not sure if this fourth one is showing with my video here, but these are 4 examples of Web 3.0 technologies. Internet of Things devices, AI, blockchain and cryptocurrency, and virtual reality or augmented reality are all components of this new web that's taking shape today. And this is a web, like I had just mentioned, that's more decentralized and private and focused on the user. But hopefully blockchain can contribute a lot to that privacy and data privacy aspect of Web 3.0. Web 3.0, when it relates to blockchain, is providing a second option to people like us. So the internet that we're using today, we really only have one option if you think about it. Like, sure, you can delete your Facebook, or you can use a super secure email provider instead of using Google. But at the end of the day, in reality, most people only have one choice when it comes to the internet. We're hoping that Web 3.0 will bring power and control back to us people as users, remove these centralized points of control with the massive big tech companies, and then bring the ability to participate in the global economy to people who were not able to do so prior to this new new infrastructure of the web. So, like I mentioned, Web 3.0 is a huge mission, a huge vision, and blockchain is a major component of that, but not everything. This is a diagram. I know you probably can't read this, but a diagram created from Multicoin Capital, which is actually based in Austin, where I live, but gives you an idea of how much work is actually going into all these different components of the Web 3.0 stack, they call it. So as you get down here, this is more infrastructure where networks like Polkadot and Kusama will live. You have on-chain protocols, you have off-chain services, and then up here, finally, the end user stack. So this is where eventually, once all these kind of initial layers are built, then we'll start seeing some truly beautiful and easy to interact with applications just like we have on iPhones and Androids and on the web today. Again, this is a crazy, very busy slide, but just to show you some of the components here. So you see like Polkadot here, Cosmos, Algorand, some of these layer 1 protocols here. Brave, Browser, MetaMask being more towards the end user. And I'll get into this a little bit more in a second. And again, Web 3.0, tons of different services being built. Basically, every service that existed in the Web 2.0 ecosystem is really being built out in Web 3.0. So now let's get into Polkadot a little bit. So Web 3.0's decentralization movement was really fueled by Bitcoin and the technology behind Bitcoin in around 2008. This was then built upon and evolved into Ethereum when smart contracts were added to the whole blockchain ecosystem. But since 2015, we've grown, but we've reached a point where we realize that this stuff cannot scale. Bitcoin has done a decent job scaling. Ethereum's had a lot of trouble scaling. And I think the industry is really waiting for that next evolution of something to kind of get us to the next step or the next level. The key is that you basically have an ecosystem of all these separate blockchains operating in silos, which would be the same thing as the internet in the United States not being able to, send a message or make a phone call or, send an email to someone in Colombia. It just doesn't make any sense. So we need something to connect all these blockchains together into a unified ecosystem where multiple blockchains are serving their their specific purpose and what they do best, but starting to connect everything into one instead of just trying to operate completely from one another. So Gavin Wood was former CTO and was co-founder of Ethereum back with Vitalik in the early days of Ethereum. He also created the Solidity programming language, and following his work with Ethereum, he founded Polkadot in 2016. So there's been a lot of work being done the last few years since the project was started. But luckily, we've gotten to the point where there's been so much good work done that we're about ready to start launching. So Kusama, which I'll get into in a bit, has launched last July or August and has really been proving that the Polkadot code works, because Kusama is essentially the same code as Polkadot, just an earlier release of this. And now Polkadot's getting ready to launch, which is taking up a lot of our time on the team at Web3 and at Parity. So Polkadot, here's a great image to kind of visualize what Polkadot is and will be, and what Kusama is and will be very soon. But Polkadot is a scalable blockchain, most importantly, made up of multiple individual blockchains, or what we sometimes refer to as shards. It's an interoperable protocol, so interoperable meaning intercommunication of value, of data, of information between blockchains instead of just completely isolated blockchains that are really only built for really only built once and can only be used in that one way. There's no way to kind of customize based on what you need. And then security as well. This gets into the technical side, but we'll have, since this is a proof of stake network, Polkadot will have a very extensive network of validators who are helping secure and run the network. And if you're a development team and you build a blockchain, or you want to come build an application, any development team that comes in can basically have plug and play security, or security from day one by just plugging into the Polkadot relay chain, versus in other legacy or pre-existing blockchain networks, a team had to build a blockchain or build a project and then go out and recruit a whole set of validators to raise enough money to really secure the network, which put a lot of time burden on those development teams. And we think this is going to take a lot of that pressure and work off of development teams with Polkadot. Already went over this. So out of all these protocols, let's get into why Polkadot and what makes Polkadot different. So I mentioned the interoperability and the scalability. So this is something that will really change the way that hopefully change the speed at which the industry kind of starts progressing, because previously there's been a lot of scalability issues with other platforms. So the scalability of Polkadot should help alleviate some of that pressure when things start to get to like a high amount of throughput. Easy blockchain innovation. So this is another key, is just trying to make it as easy as possible for development teams who want to build their own blockchain itself, and also for teams who want to build applications on those blockchains. Substrate, which was created by Parity, plays a big role in making blockchain building easy. So Daniel, I know we'll get into this in his presentation and talk a lot more about Substrate. Forkless and future-proof. So because Polkadot has on-chain governance, we can basically make any changes to the underlying infrastructure or protocol of Polkadot without having to fork. So this solves a lot of issues around that and making sure that we are future-proof. So if something does need to change in 5 years, we don't have to fork the entire blockchain. We can just build the change into the code just based off of a governance vote. Security for everyone, I talked about that, and then a network governance driven by users. So the network will be completely decentralized, just like Kusama is today, and the governance will be run on chain, where people as token holders can participate in votes or proposing new ideas or proposals if they would like to. PureStake is one of our projects, or one of our ecosystem organizations based out of Boston in the US. And these are just, I can talk about it all I want, but this is coming from an actual user. So there are 4 reasons why they chose to work with Polkadot are here. So solid security, they talk about the scalable design. Substrate was a big feature or key for them choosing Polkadot. And then the ecosystem of projects that I'll show you in a few slides, and then the leadership, obviously, with people like Gavin and a lot of the leadership team that we have at both organizations. It's a lot on this slide. I think I'm getting close to these. And so I'll be sending the deck out so we can get into this if you'd like to check this out afterwards. But keys here, key differences between ETH 2.0 and Polkadot. On-chain governance is a big one. The way that Parachain slots, again, this gets technical, but the way that Parachains are actually kind of leased out is different, and the way that gas is handled on Ethereum is different than the way we do it on Polkadot. And then the back-end development languages, Daniel can probably answer questions around this, but everything is being built right now in Rust, but can then be interpreted using WebAssembly to kind of, in the non-technical way of saying it, it's kind of a way of like translating the Rust language into into a language that can be interpreted in multiple different platforms or languages. So just to get into a little bit of the technical aspects of Polkadot, and I will wrap this up in a minute or two. So Polkadot and Kusama both built around this core relay chain, which is what kind of runs the whole network. And then each of these squares is, you can think of its own customized blockchain, which we call Parachains. So just to make it a little bit more real, here's some examples of how Polkadot and Kusama could look very soon. So instead of being, an external chain where there's only one underlying blockchain and then applications can be built on top of that, Polkadot will have several different blockchains called Parachains that can be customized using Substrate and kind of tweaked for the exact use case that they're meant for. So something like insurance probably doesn't need to run super fast. So the insurance chain can probably make trade-offs for speed and maybe increase their security or increase other aspects that might help that use case. Another one recently kind of announced or discussed is a Kala network. They're a really talented team based out of New Zealand, building a stable coin, a DeFi ecosystem, launching that on Kusama first, and then we'll be launching this on Polkadot. Chainlink also recently announced they're going to be building their own dedicated Parachain on Kusama and Polkadot, and this will of course be a Oracle chain that can pull data from kind of the real world and bring that into the blockchain ecosystem. So, for example, stock market data or weather data or sports data can be brought into this blockchain ecosystem and then maybe used in a gaming app or used in a sports betting application or really anything in the financial world, so on. Supply chain, digital identity, and then behind this video is Internet of Things. But the number of use cases is almost unimaginable. It goes on, and we'll continue to just watch how things evolve. This I wanted to highlight. We'll have bridges to other existing blockchains because, of course, we don't expect those things to go away. So I imagine Polkadot will probably be plugging into the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem, maybe even bringing like Bitcoin, wrapped Bitcoin into Ethereum through our Bitcoin bridge. There's a lot of work going on in this area at the moment. The relay chain I already mentioned. Bridge chains, just discussed that. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, probably privacy chains. We'll continue to see teams building out these bridges here in the next, in the coming months. Validators, skip past. So this is kind of what Kusama and Polkadot could look like very soon once the bridge between Kusama and Polkadot is built. So Polkadot and Kusama are essentially the same code. Kusama was just an earlier unaudited version of Polkadot that was released, and we're really starting to see a lot of traction here for teams who may not need the really super enterprise grade security of Polkadot. If they're willing to take trade-offs, maybe it's a gaming application that is like would love to have like high speed but might not need the high security of like a banking application or a micropayments application or something like that. So Kusama, the logo you'll see here is the little canary. So a canary in the coal mine was essentially what people would send into a mine to make sure that it hadn't collapsed back in the day. So we call it a canary network, and we're really starting to see this new gold standard for deployment kind of emerge, where you have something that first launches in a testnet, traditional testnet, just like you've seen with Ethereum, then launching on a live network like Kusama, which we call a canary network, which is kind of the exact same network as Polkadot, just a little bit more experimental ground, and then moving to Polkadot eventually for the teams who would like to make it to that point. Mentioned a lot of this. Kusama is a live network for innovation, for new ventures, high throughput, and sacrificing a little bit on the security side. Talked about all this. Kusama is live today. You can check it out at polkadot.js if you just Google that. There's a live set of validators already running the network. There's quite a bit of governance activity that has already gone on. And this Polkadot Kusama bridge will hopefully be released here soon. Skip through these. This is just what the UI looks like on polkadot.js. Here's a lot of the teams that have already been building with Substrate and will hopefully be on Kusama or Polkadot here soon. And here's just some written out. So I mentioned Akala, which is that project out of New Zealand. Laminar's similar team working on DeFi. We've got everything from gold on the blockchain to a privacy coin. And again, I'll send all this out, and this can all be found through our web pages as well. Now, to wrap things up, decentralization is really about providing a second choice. I mentioned earlier that there's really no choice for people right now as far as the way that they use the internet. So we're hoping that we can bring that second choice through blockchain technology and through 3.0 as a whole. And how does Polkadot contribute to privacy? We're building a lot of those, like, I mentioned layer one, lower level technologies, and really enabling this ecosystem for developers to come in and build on top of that. So we're hoping, and I'm expecting to see a lot of developers building decentralized applications that can be used by people like you and I, like enterprises, to start moving away from the centralization of the current model. A couple examples of projects. Subsocial is a really interesting one, being built out of the Ukraine, and they are building essentially a highly scalable kind of infrastructure for people to build their own censorship-resistant social networks. So it's almost like a Facebook or a Twitter or a blog platform being built with Substrate. Another one, Akala is building the stablecoin and DeFi ecosystem, launching first on Kusama and then moving to Polkadot eventually as well. And they're already live on their testnets, and you can check all of that out. And I'll send some links to that too. That reminds me, if you can give your email and name an email to Daniel, I think he may have already collected this, but that'll be helpful for me to be able to send all of you guys the slides and some follow-up links and get connected to each other. So that's about it. So just a couple follow-ups. So on the privacy side and Web3 side, here's just a few recommendations. So if you haven't seen The Great Hack on Netflix, I would recommend watching that. It's pretty eye-opening. I mentioned, or I don't know if I mentioned this, but the Privacy Project is a New York Times project focused on internet privacy. Pretty interesting to follow. And a few other things here. So one, would love to have more Polkadot ambassadors in Colombia. You can ask Daniel about his experience, but it's a really good way of getting more deeply connected into what we're doing with Polkadot and Kusama and Substrate. So we have calls every couple weeks where ambassadors we have about 37 countries and 175 ambassadors now around the world. So a lot of great work being done on the technical side and on the non-technical kind of community growth, translation, anything people want to work on, it's kind of being done. And here's my contact info. So Dan at web3.foundation. You can find me on Telegram, or you can add me on Twitter and send me a message there. So with that, sorry it went a little bit longer than I expected, but Daniel, I'll pass it over to you to start getting into Substrate. And again, sorry I couldn't make it to Bogotá today, but really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the presentation. Hopefully you learned something, and I hope that you can reach out to me so we can meet over the phone, on Zoom, or next time I'm in Colombia. So thank you. Appreciate it.